Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 85 of the 476ers podcast. Today we're talking about yesterday's trade deadline, so stay tuned.
Yo. Yeah. Justice for the blind, just something that'll find in the rhymes that are coming from my mind.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode, I think it's episode 85. I don't know. I literally have been, for those paying attention, I've been wrong for the last 4 episodes straight. Every time I do this and I go and edit it, I'm like, this was not the episode I said it was. But that's fine. You already know what it is. I'm not going to remember the episode number. You would think I had the common sense to come on here and be like, okay, let me check the episode number before I talk. And sometimes I do. Anytime I've gotten it right, it's because I'm like, let me check what episode I'm on. But so be it. The Soviet, unified, steady flow. You already know. Shout out to Jay-Z, dead presidents. Okay. So here we're going to talk about yesterday's trade deadline. I'm not going to talk about the Sixers game. Honestly, I'll give you a quick, just whatever. I missed the second half of the game because I fell asleep because I don't sleep. Your boy don't sleep. If you know me, you know I have trouble sleeping. So anytime I can get sleep, I'm taking it. And I missed the second half of the game. I checked the highlights this morning, watched some of the, looked at the stats or whatever. I mean, it's funny because we didn't trade for Kyle Lowry, but when all those talks were going on, I think I did mention this on a podcast last week or maybe 2 weeks ago that, trading Danny would be a little bittersweet because Danny has won games for us. Obviously we would become not necessarily a worse defensive team replacing Danny with Kyle, depending what we had to give up, because it seemed like we were probably going to have to give up Danny and Matisse for Kyle. Then we become a markedly worse defensive team. And that is bittersweet because obviously you can't lose both of them, but losing Danny, we lose one of our best perimeter defenders and somebody who has actually won us a few games. As much as I can be critical about Danny and as crazy as that dude drives me at times, he's won us some games. I can't really hate. And yesterday, same thing, right? Leading scorers, 28 points. In a game that was kind of not necessarily a brick fest, just great defense all around. Honestly, they're one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. We're one of the best defensive teams, arguably the best defensive team in the NBA. And it showed, and Danny was able to get loose, make them pay for letting him go, got his championship ring and then showed him some shit. Shannon Sharp tweeted something yesterday about Danny being able to shoot for everyone except for the Lakers. Well, against the Raptors, he didn't shoot that. I mean, with the Raptors, he didn't shoot great. I think at that point we had already seen Danny crashing back down to earth. This is one of his best shooting seasons, this is, I think, his best shooting season in the last 3 seasons. But it's hard. Not everyone can play next to LeBron. You know what I mean? I think that, and I've said this a million times before, and this is not to turn into an MJ LeBron debate, but one of the things that I'll always appreciate about MJ is the sacrifice, the willingness to sacrifice him dominating the ball. The year they lose to that Pistons, the next year they come in, obviously Phil comes in and Mike decides to buy into Tech's winner system. That's one of the most important things that happens in his life, where the year before he was high usage rate, doing it all, scored a career high in points, but you get checked out of the playoffs. So I think some guys, the point is guys struggle playing next to LeBron at times. We've seen that. It's not really anything new. And so, whatever. So Danny struggles playing next to LeBron. No big deal. A lot of people do. So Danny's, been playing really well for us. Yeah, he's had some games that are, forgettable at best. And he's had some moments that, are disappointing. But games like yesterday, he won that game for us. You know what I mean? At least based on what I've seen. Again, I didn't watch the second half. But in the first half, he hit a bunch of big threes. Seems like he continued that in the second half. Toby, 8 for 10 overall. I think that's great, because the thing is, I think one side of you could demand Toby to be more aggressive or to score more. But I think, too, Toby came out of the All-Star break with a clear goal to make everyone pay, or, whatever you want to call it. And he's had some really good games, and he's also had some really bad games. And I think yesterday is a game where it's like, hey, I'm not having open shots, or I'm not getting the open looks I need to necessarily get. So there are other things. I'm sure if I watch that second half, I'll find a ton of places where he put an imprint on the game, maybe grabbed a big rebound. That I think is great. Ben doesn't have a great shooting night. I think he's 1 for 9 overall, but goes to the line, shoots 11 free throws. Huge. You know what I mean? 7 for 11. Huge free throw number. So, Seth, Seth seemed to have played well. Furkan, who I'm assuming is going to be out of the rotation, and we'll talk about that in a second. Whatever. Maxey played 5 seconds or whatever it was. So, Dwight, hey, I know you want to be the agitator, but maybe don't get thrown out in the first quarter when we don't have any centers. When we just traded Tony Bradley, who was playing great. Okay, I'll get to that in a second. And that's it. So that's a win. That's a big win, man. That makes me happy. We play the Clippers on Saturday. Before we go to the Nuggets and then stop at Cleveland. Honestly, we could lose the next 3 games, and I think this is a win. I think we're 7-6 right now without Joe this year, and that's as good as we're going to be. Honestly, I'm going to be honest. If Brett Brown was coaching this team, this is a credit to Doc. If Brett Brown was coaching this team, I feel comfortable saying that we lose a lot of games as soon as Joe goes down. I'm going to just completely keep it a buck with you. I got to give Doc some credit here, man. I got to give Doc some credit. He's coaching up this fucking team. We come in there yesterday with no center, essentially, with Mike Scott starting. Then Dwight gets his ass thrown out. Paul Reed gets a chance. Paul Reed plays, okay, B-ball Paul, MVP, G League, but then you're in the NBA. Real life comes hard. But it's all good. So that's it, man. Again, we could lose the next 3 games. And I'm not going to be happy, obviously. But the point being that, we came out in times when Warriors, again, have no Steph. This team, no LeBron, no AD. This is a great situation for a young team. I think last year, 2 years ago, we probably lose these games, even with Joe starting. You know what I mean? Where we're just unfocused and unmotivated and whatever Doc has done. I mean, credit to the players, too. Toby's a pro, man. Toby, I think out of everybody on the team, I think Toby first and then probably Ben. Because when Joe's playing, he's the best player on the court. I think he knows that already. You know what I mean? He knows he's the best player on the court. So anything is possible at that point. Whereas Toby and Ben, you have to see them be aggressive. They need to come out, with intentions. We're not losing this fucking game. Fuck no. And those guys come out like pros. I got to give them credit, man. So that's it. That's all I got on yesterday's game. Let's talk about trades, though, right? Yesterday, apparently marked as the busiest trade deadline day in terms of player movement. 10% of the NBA was traded yesterday. I think it was 50 total players, which is the most amount of players that's ever been traded, which is interesting because it didn't seem that busy. I think maybe it's because as a Sixers fan and we're circulating and rumors, we're paying attention so heavily to what we might do that maybe we're not seeing what some of the other players and teams are doing. But busy trade deadline day. So, let's start. I'm going to just jump right from these headlines right here, I think. From the So the Spurs, they buy out LaMarcus. LaMarcus wasn't doing anything on that team anymore. I saw some guys saying, we got to give him credit as a great Spur. And it's I guess, I don't know what he did except essentially not be able to convince Kawhi to stay. LaMarcus is like a complicated person in the NBA. You know what I mean? If you've ever heard any rumors or stories, they're never really great for LaMarcus. So I don't know. I don't really have much to say about him. He's looking at the Heat or the Nets, obviously. Everyone and their mother is looking at the Nets, so that makes me sick, honestly. The NBA has to change that. I pitched this on Twitter, and I think that this should be a rule that if a player with Andre Drummond about to get bought out, right, from a massive contract, and Andre Drummond this year is like an 18 and 16 guy who I have on my fantasy team and has not played in 5 weeks, and I'm still winning, though your boy is still winning. But the point is, for you to get bought out, to be a borderline all-star, listen, I am not an Andre Drummond fan. I'm not. I'm going to be completely honest. That dude is not an all-star, but he gets all-star votes, and he does put up crazy numbers to his credit. I mean, that man puts up wild numbers, a fantastic rebounder. For him to possibly end up on the Nets, it's come on, man. This is nonsense. They already have 3 superstars, and now you're going to bring in Andre Drummond, who's not a superstar, but is someone who puts up these wild numbers. They should not be able to get Andre Drummond, in my opinion. You know what I mean? You shouldn't be able to get 3 of the top 15 players in the NBA, period. I think that the NBA needs to find ways to make that borderline impossible, but you shouldn't be able to get Andre Drummond too in this situation. And my argument, what I pitched was that you should have to pay a percentage of the contract. You shouldn't just Andre Drummond shouldn't get bought out of a $20 million contract and then sign the veterans minimum to join the Nets. That shouldn't be happening. That should be bullshit. So we'll see. That's Drummond. I guess so Drummond's going to get bought out. Now, Drummond apparently the Nets are not on the teams he's looking at, which is interesting. People have been assuming it's the Nets are going to come in. Apparently, he's been looking at the Lakers. He's been looking at the Clippers. He's been looking at the Hornets, which is interesting. I actually kind of like it on the Hornets if he doesn't mind not getting – the problem with Andre Drummond is he wants the ball. You know what I mean? Like, he's Clint Capella, but he thinks he's Joe or something. You know what I mean? He like wants the offense at times to go through him. Listen, he's a good player. He's a solid passer, but he has no post ability. It's just no ability to post moves. You know what I mean? So if he can subvert some of his ego, you know, especially consider you Andre, you are so problematic that a young Cavs team that's losing doesn't think you can help them be better, right? You need to subvert your ego. They're going to pay $20 million. They're going to pay a hefty price tag to get rid of your contract. That's wild. If you subvert your ego, you could help the Hornets for sure. So he's going to look at the Hornets. And the list of teams, I think it's the Clippers, the Lakers, the Hornets, the Celtics, and the Heat. I think he might be looking at, which I don't understand what he would do on the Heat. I might be wrong about the Heat though. But the Nets were not on that list, which I find interesting. Hopefully he doesn't go to the Nets, man. You know what I mean? I like it just fucking makes me sick. Honestly, it just makes me sick. If you go to the Nets, Andre, then do not subvert your ego. Please keep your ego up. Demand the ball from 3 of the top 15 players in the NBA. Say you want that ball. There is a beautiful woman walking by. You know, say hello. I'm sorry, I did not mean to get distracted. Please demand the ball from KD. Wave KD off at times. KD, fuck out of here. I'm Andre. Give me the ball. I'm Andre. I'm going to drum some shit up right here. Watch. And then do your thing. You know what I mean? Andre Drummond is the league leader in me sending the Patrick Ewing gif when he was, you know, him coaching at Georgetown a couple years ago, and he's talking to the one center, and he's like, a step back, one-legged, fade away. When do you practice that? When? You know what I mean? That Andre Drummond leads the league in me sending that gif every time he does something. So please do that on the Nets. Please do not do that on the Hornets. I would love to see a good Hornets team. I think that would be fun. I like the Hornets. Hopefully, LaMelo is able to come back this season. I mean, obviously, the initial report was that he'd missed the season, but now it seems like they're kind of going back on that. We'll see. You know what I mean? I think the Hornets didn't realize that they were possibly in playoff contention. So they were like, yeah, he's going to miss the season. I mean, we're going to be done in 6 weeks. You know, and they were like, oh wait, we're in the playoffs. Oh, no, he could come back. I'm sorry, he could come back. Wow, I didn't realize that. So we'll see. Obviously, Raptors don't trade Kyle Lowry. They trade Norman Powell, which is you know what? Yeah, fuck it. Let's talk about Norman Powell right here. I wish I could cross these off the list. That Norman Powell trade, I'll be honest with you, Norman Powell and Aaron Gordon somehow fooled the NBA economy into thinking that these guys are real game changers, you know, and I'm like confused as to how that happened. Not exactly sure how that happened. I've been calling Norman Powell normal Norman now for 2 years. You know what I mean? He's okay. Don't get me wrong. Norman's a nice player. I don't see how trading Gary Trent Jr. and trading Rodney Hood and trading a draft pick is how Norman Powell is better than all of those assets. I don't see it personally. I think Norman is a good player. I think he's nice. I don't know where he fits on that Blazers. Are you bringing him in to be your small forward? I mean, he would be a small forward. He's a shooting guard. I think he's 6'5", 6'6". You already have an undersized backcourt. If you bringing him to come off the bench, I don't think Norman has intentions of coming off the bench next season when he goes into free agency. So what exactly was that? And I haven't read any pieces. I'm sure there's going to be other people who maybe are like, we love the Norman Powell trade. Maybe. I know Reggie Miller said that yesterday on yesterday's broadcast. Reggie, you're wilding. I just don't see it. I just don't see how normal Norman is going to make this team better. This reminds me of when the Blazers traded for Rodney Hood, and they thought Rodney Hood was going to be something really good. Same thing when the Cavaliers traded for Rodney Hood. Rodney was putting up these good numbers. But, just you find out that these guys are like average players. You know what I mean? Again, back to the Raptors right now have been such an up and down team. They've dealt with a ton of injuries. Norman has gotten a ton of opportunity. Now he's capitalizing. He's been shooting really well, career highs across the board. But he's been the majority of their offense. So what is he going to actually do on the Blazers when you went from shooting the most or second most shots to now easily being the third biggest shot taker, maybe the fourth behind Carmelo, depending how Melo is doing off the bench, right? I'm a little bit confused by that. You know what I mean? I'm a little bit confused by that trade. Yeah, I'm confused. I'm confused by that trade. I don't see it. I don't like it. I love it for the Raptors. I think Gary Trent is a good player. You know, I had Gary Trent on my fantasy team. I got him because it was clear once CJ went down and they put Gary Trent in the starting lineup. Mind you, Gary Trent wasn't starting earlier in the season. For whatever reason, after he played great last year, CJ goes down, Gary Trent comes in and he lit it up. He lit us the fuck up. And he lit it up over the last until CJ came back. You know what I mean? And then coming back off the bench, he started going back to up and down. I think Gary Trent probably goes to the Raptors. He's a better defender, in my opinion, than Norman Powell. And if you start him, you may fuck around and see that this dude is legit. You know, this dude is good. You know what I mean? And you're saving the price. They save the price tag. They don't have to pay Norman Powell next season. They have Gary Trent on a somewhat cheap contract, I believe. So I don't know what his contract is actually, but and you get Roddy Hood, who's a nice player off the bench, good, solid defender, good offensive player. I mean, I think the Raptors somehow got better. And I think that I don't like that trade for the Blazers. I don't like it. We'll see. You know, maybe it does make them better. They're getting Nurkic back on Friday. Dame yesterday. I mean, they were getting bombed. Tyler Hero was hitting bombs against them, and Dame, they played. It was an interesting game. Their defense is the problem. You know what I mean? Gary Trent was a better defender. They got worse defensively by bringing Norman Powell. They gave up. I think they gave up 16 of 32 3-pointers or something yesterday. That's obscene. That's just obscene. Anyway, so I don't see how that makes them better. The Mavs traded essentially nothing. I forgot what they actually traded. I mean, it was very little to get JJ Redick and what's this dude's name from the Pelicans? Oh my goodness, it's making me sick that I can't remember his name. Nicolo Melli, who, I don't know. You need more shooters, not less. You know what I mean? What was this trade for? I forgot what they got. It does not help them. You know, and it's kind of confusing why the Pelicans would do this. Let me see. Move this. JJ Melly. Yeah. So they trade for James Johnson, Karate Chop, and Wes Iwundu. Yeah, that doesn't make you better, Pelicans. Confused. You need more shooting, not less. You need more shooting, not less. You need shooting to flank these guys. You know what I mean? The trade to me would have made sense is maybe trading Melo for Alonzo for Lauri Markkanen. But again, Lauri is a power forward. I just don't get it. I mean, he's a center. I don't get it. I don't know why they keep playing at power forward. We'll talk about the Bulls in a second, but they need more shooting. So how does losing JJ and Melly help you? When they came back against the Celtics, was that 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago? The reason it happened was because they had essentially benched, they moved, Steven Adams off the bench. They moved Steven Adams to the bench. They put Melly at the 5, who was essentially strong enough to handle any of the Celtics. The Celtics don't have any centers that are really special. I mean, Daniel Tice is 6'9". You know what I mean? Who just got traded to the Bulls. He's 6'9", so whatever. And Tristan Thompson isn't good. I don't know when we're going to figure that out. Maybe we'll start realizing that soon. And Melly essentially was able to stretch the floor and give Zion all the space he needed, give Brandon Ingram all the space he needed. It's funny because now we're starting to see the conversation again. The same Joel and Ben conversation is now happening with Brandon Ingram and Zion. The difference, what's interesting about this conversation is Ben doesn't need the ball, doesn't need to score to be effective, right? We want him to score more for sure. We really want him to be good at free throw shooting. But he can subvert to Joe to be the best player. Well, now what happens when you have two guys who are ball dominant on the same team but don't necessarily fit? It's going to be interesting to see. I don't know what's going to happen with that team. I just know that trading JJ Redick and trading Nicolo Melli, two of your better shooters, doesn't make you better to get James Johnson here. Now, I don't know how James Johnson and Wes Welland to help you. This is going to help it's going to help the Mavericks a lot. You know what I mean? It's going to help the Mavericks. They need shooting. They lost shooting with Seth. Seth last year was shooting like 54% at times for them, and was the perfect outlet for Luka. So now they get JJ. JJ's going to come in there. He's going to help them immediately. I think Melly's going to help them immediately as well. Just another power forward who can spread the floor and shoot. You know, can do a few things out there. So I really like that trade for the Mavericks. I do not understand why the Pelicans did that. Go figure. Oladipo to the Heat. I mean, this is a hijacking right here. I get it because what let me see what the Heat gave up. I can't remember off the top of my head. I mean, they gave up Kelly Olynyk. Kelly Olynyk was helping them, though, in all fairness. Kelly Olynyk was helping them. But who did they just trade? They also traded for somebody else yesterday. I can't remember. Let me see. They traded Olynyk and Avery Bradley. Yeah, Avery didn't do anything in a pick swap in 2022. Who else did the Heat? I'm trying to see who the Heat also added. They added damn, I can't remember who else they added. They added somebody else who essentially is just Kelly Olynyk again. You know what I mean? So it's not really going to hurt them. Yeah, they got better. They got better long term. They didn't give up. They didn't want to give up Tyler Hero. They didn't want to give up Duncan Robinson, and that made sense. I mean, even when those trade talks were talking, the NBA is so interesting. This is what makes the NBA my favorite. Right? This is why I love the NBA, because at times it's not as simple as, well, this guy is better than this guy, right? Yeah, on paper, Kyle Lowry is better than Tyler Hero. He's better than Duncan Robinson, but the fit, losing those shooters would hurt more than bringing in Kyle Lowry to that team, right? Especially because Jimmy is not a good three-point shooter. He shoots 25% this year. Not a good three-point shooter. So, and mind you, Kyle Lowry is a good three-point shooter, but he's not the same type of player as they are. These are spot-up shooters. And Tyler Hero is a little bit more than that, right? So losing those guys is tough. You end up bringing Oladipo in, who's young, right? Who's young, and he's younger, so he's on the timeline, more close to the timeline of Bam, more close to the timeline of Duncan and Tyler Hero, and wants to be in Miami. So essentially what you're saying is, okay, so now we're set for the Jimmy era. When the Jimmy era ends in 2 or 3 years, we're set for the next era too. You know what I mean? Especially if Oladipo can round back into form, if he continues to improve, this makes the Heat better. This sucks. This sucks to me. You know what I mean? Because I hate the fucking Heat. And if I got to hear, if Victor Oladipo, quote unquote, fits into the Heat culture, I'm going to snap. I don't want to hear it. But this is a great trade for them. You know what I mean? I think this is a great trade for them. You know, especially if Victor can come back. The problem is we haven't seen Victor round into form yet. But I think what we're going to find out really soon here is that, what we just heard was that the Pacers, there was a rumor floated around that the Pacers players are not happy with Mark Daigneault. I can't remember his last name. I think it's Daigneault. Their coach, their new coach. They're not happy with him. Possibly that Victor Oladipo wasn't happy with him. On top of that, Victor wasn't happy with the franchise because they wanted to trade him last year. He hasn't been playing well next to Malcolm Brogdon. Malcolm Brogdon and TJ Warren and Oladipo kind of all very repetitive. And then you add Karis LeVert. Right. Well, the Karis LeVert is part of the. I'm sorry. They didn't add Karis LeVert. They traded, obviously. Then you go to the Rockets, a franchise in disarray of no fault of Steven Silas and maybe that front office, really mostly because of, James Harden burned it down and left. You know what I mean? And it is what it is. So then you're there. John Wall is missing time for injury. Christian Wood is missing time for injury. It's a whole fucking mess. He doesn't want to stay there. He doesn't want to sign in the Rockets long term. There was a rumor at a point that he might consider it. The Rockets offered him a contract, I think it was 2 years, and that's kind of like a slap in the face a little bit. Victor's a young guy. He probably wants a long-term max deal. You know what I mean? The Heat are probably going to give him that. It won't surprise me if he goes to the Heat and is Victor Oladipo again. You know what I mean? It really won't surprise me to see him be better on the Heat next to Jimmy, next to these guys who they're chasing something. They were just in the finals. This is going to make them better for sure. I think it's going to make them better. If it doesn't make them better this year, it makes them better long term, no question. This is a great fucking trade. I mean, this is a hijacking. You know what I mean? I wish I could remember who the fuck else they traded for. Is it here? No, it's not. It's not here. I'm not seeing it here. Who else did they trade for? It's driving me crazy. Let's see here. Is it deeper to the Rockets? Yeah. That Avery Bradley thing did not work out for them. Well, actually, it did work out for them. It did work out for them on the court, but they, the Rockets got nothing. Listen, the Rockets essentially were in a situation. I know people are saying, oh, the Rockets got hijacked, and they did. Let's be clear. They did get hijacked. But the reason that they got Bielitsa. You know what I mean? Bielitsa is a kind of a poor man's Kelly Olynyk, but I don't even think he's a poor man's Kelly Olynyk. Kelly Olynyk just benefited from being with good coaching, good players around him. I think Bielitsa could probably come there and give them the exact same thing. He's also a good shooter, not the same defender that Olynyk is, but I think he's going to give them much of the same thing, honestly. You know what I mean? Bielitsa was like a coveted player 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Obviously, he spurned us, which was fine. I don't like that setup, that power forward center. Obviously, you know how I feel about it. So, Bielitsa is going to help them. You know what I mean? It's going to help them. But the deal is that the Rockets, they couldn't keep Oladipo. Everyone in the NBA knew it. And it's more about, do you want to lose him for nothing in free agency, or are you going to try to get something from him? You get Avery Bradley, and they gave up space. Essentially, the rumor, the story was that they wanted to give up space for Kevin Porter Jr. to be the guy. Give him a shot to be the guy with his bodies. I mean, he's been playing well. You know what I mean? He's been playing well. Hopefully, he can get over some of these personal things that are attached to him. Listen, I hate to see guys like that. And obviously, I'm not here defending him. Some of the stories are not great. Some of the stories are not great. The personal issue stories with Kevin Porter Jr. are not great. Ultimately, I just want to see people become better, and in the NBA especially, more talent is better. You know what I mean? You get to see more guys. So, some of it is selfish, right? You want to see more players that are good, but then from a personal note, I want to see guys bounce back. I love a good story, and I don't mean bounce back as in their PR, their public relations show that they've bounced back. I mean, bounce back in a way that's like, this is like a good person now. You know what I mean? Like, Boogie has always been my favorite example of that, where it's like the difference is on the court, he looks like this asshole and people are critical of Boogie, but by every story, I'll never forget reading the story on ESPN maybe 6 or 7 years ago that said, Boogie had a PR rep, essentially, I think from his agent's office, essentially saying like, hey, Boogie, why don't you, because Boogie donates a ton of money. He spends a ton of times in the communities where he played, like in Sacramento, he had done a ton of that community. And the PR rep was like, hey, Boogie, why don't you, let's make this a photo op so we can change your persona a bit. And Boogie was like, no, you know what I mean? Like, I don't give a fuck what people think about me. I'm not doing this for what people think, you know what I mean? And maybe, who knows, maybe that was a PR leaking that story, but even if they leaked that story, I am convinced that wasn't Boogie's doing, you know what I mean? I think Boogie has never wanted to look that way, and I love that, man. I like that. I've always been a fan of Boogie. So anyway, point being, just want to see people be better, you know what I mean? So hopefully that works out for Kevin Porter Jr. and the Rockets, but ultimately that was their deal. They want to give space for Kevin Porter Jr. And see what happens. I guess we'll see what happens with John Wall. I don't see how John Wall fits with a Kevin Porter Jr. type player, because Kevin Porter, I mean, he's been compared to Harden a million times, you know what I mean? And, Harden wouldn't really necessarily fit so well next to a John Wall. Although Harden has showed the ability to fit really well, but it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different, honestly. Kyrie doesn't necessarily need the ball to be effective. We saw him do it next to LeBron. So, we'll see. Either way, great trade for the Heat. You know what I mean? A great fucking trade. Fuck them. I hate them, but that makes them better. The Hawks traded Rondo to the Clippers for Lou Will. Lou Will is about to restore the local economy of Atlanta. He's about to be out there eating all the lemon pepper wings at Magic City. I mean, he's about to bring that economy. I mean, just invest in Atlanta. Lou Will is bringing goodwill to Atlanta. He's about to restore that community to its former glory. I assure you. He's about to put money in. I mean, he's from Atlanta. You know what I mean? He's about to, him and Bow Wow about to be out there. You know what I mean? Wowing strippers, doing the whole thing. Good for Lou Will. It's a low risk, low reward, because Lou Will's not doing a ton for the Clippers. Doesn't play any defense. And the Clippers are trying to bet on Rondo being playoff Rondo again for them, like he was for the Lakers last year, where he played great defense in the playoffs, the shooting, career high 3-point numbers. You bring him right back into that build. Well, even though they were in the bubble, but he was playing well before the bubble. So we'll see. I think that's kind of their whole point. We have seen Rondo do it. We've seen playoff Rondo bounce back. I think Rondo struggles when there isn't a clear thing. Like there has to be some sort of motivation. Like when he was playoff Rondo on the Bulls, it was this like me, Jimmy, and Dwayne Wade were lunch pail boys. You know what I mean? We're going to come here for violence. When he was on the Mavericks, it didn't work. Him and Carvalho didn't get together. Different type of offense. He didn't get along with them. When he was on the Pelicans, it was the same type of thing. Me, AD, and Drew Holiday, lunch pail guys. So I think it kind of depends on where Rondo was. Rondo last year on the Lakers, championship chasing. So, maybe it'll help. Maybe it'll help the Clippers. I think that'd be great. Rondo has such an interesting career. I mean, Rondo has looked like a Hall of Fame point guard at times to where this dude shouldn't be in the NBA at times. You know what I mean? Talk about up and down. We'll talk about the Sixers last. Magic, Denver trains for Aaron Gordon. Listen, I don't get the Aaron Gordon love. I mean, I don't know what's happening where people all of a sudden are thinking like Aaron Gordon's about to tip the scales of championship basketball. But with that said, I got to give Denver some credit here. You know what I mean? This is a great deal for them. This essentially to me is a deal, the only deal that when I look like I think is appropriate based on the names. Aaron Gordon's name would probably demand more than Gary Harris and RJ Hampton. But the actual Aaron Gordon player isn't that good. They get Aaron Gordon and Gary Clark. Gary Clark, who's been playing well for the Magic, can be an off-the-bench guy. RJ Hampton, I like a lot. I like RJ Hampton a lot. But the Nuggets have a million of these guys. They come across all of these guards. The best way to put, I think it was Jackie McMullen said on a podcast. She said the mistake that the Nuggets made was drafting too well, because then they just had too many guys. That's why they had to let Jeremy Grant go, because now you're gonna have to pay Michael Porter Jr. eventually. Who you assume is gonna continue blossoming the way he is. And Gary, although Gary wasn't working for them, but then you had you have like all of these guards, man, Monte Morris and all of these dudes. RJ is just another guy in that. So I like this trade. I like everything the Magic did, honestly. I like everything the Magic did because Aaron Gordon is there's a clear ceiling. Maybe he doesn't fit. Maybe this Magic team just is whatever. And, who knows? Maybe a new city, a new uniform. Maybe Aaron Gordon all of a sudden becomes something. I do like him on the fit here. My problem with Aaron Gordon is I've seen Aaron Gordon shoot shots that I'm like, bro, this is not within your build to shoot. You're not allowed to shoot this shot. Like 2K would error out if you tried to shoot some of the Aaron Gordon shots. Like if I tried to play like Aaron Gordon plays in 2K, 2K would kick me out. And they'll be like, no. Aaron Gordon doesn't do this, okay? Aaron can't do this. And you're right, 2K. Aaron doesn't do this. You know what I mean? Aaron doesn't do this. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe, but he's coming. The difference is Aaron Gordon was a big three, quote unquote, part of a quote unquote big three on the Magic they thought they had with Aaron Gordon when they signed Evan Fournier with Vucevic, and now Aaron Gordon goes to the Nuggets to just be like the fourth guy. You know what I mean? And I think that's good for him. I think maybe he'll help. He's a good defender, so it'll help, I think, maybe kind of fit in there. I don't exactly know what the lineup is going to be. Is Aaron Gordon going to be a power forward, or is Michael Porter going to be a power forward? I think Aaron Gordon probably could maybe defend small forwards for them. We'll see. I think it's going to be interesting. He's essentially going to come and fill in Jeremy Grant's role. You know what I mean? He's going to fill in the Jeremy Grant role. So I like this trade for both sides. Honestly, I like this trade for both sides. Gary Harris was doing nothing. RJ Hampton couldn't get the time. The Nuggets don't care about picks. They care about building a contender. So, I like that trade a lot for them. A lot of teams I thought made some solid trades. The Celtics traded for Evan Fournier. Listen, it does make them better. It makes them better. But it's not. I don't think it's what they needed. I don't know. Evan Fournier is the poorest man's Gordon Hayward. The poorest man's Gordon Hayward. He's not the defender that Gordon Hayward is. He's not the playmaker that Gordon Hayward is. He's not the offensive threat that Gordon Hayward is, but he is about 25% less at all of those things that Gordon Hayward does. He'll move the ball. He doesn't need the ball to be successful. He's having a good season, but again, I'll continue to talk about. A little bit easier to have a good season when there's no expectations and you're on a bad team. You know what I mean? So, I think that he helps the Celtics, but I don't think he really makes them better. I actually think it's gotten a little bit more confusing because what's their closing lineup now? So are you going to be closing games? Is the plan to close games with Kemba, Fournier, Jalen, Jason, and whoever your center is? Right now is Luke Cornett because Thompson is out. You're not going to have Thompson closing the game, I would assume, because then he becomes a liability. Yeah, he's a great offensive rebound grabber, but when he grabs that offensive rebound, gets fouled and goes to the line and misses the free throws, that doesn't help you. Luke Cornett can't be a starter in the NBA. I like Luke Cornett. I think he's a skilled player, but he can't really be a starter. Who did they trade? I forgot who they traded Daniel Tice for. Maybe it's in here. Hold on, let's see here. Report Swingman. I forgot who. They have Time Lord, obviously, who could play the 5. But the point being is when I'm talking about closing, the other problem is, are you not going to have Marcus Smart closing? That's your best defender. You know what I mean? Jalen's a great defender. Tatum's a great defender, but Marcus Smart is the best defender on that team. So is he not going to be closing games? I kind of get it. Listen, Marcus Smart offensively is an issue. You know, just like Aaron Gordon, he be wilding out here. And he be shooting shots that are not part of his 2K package. You know, you can't do this. You're not Kyrie. Relax. Right? But he has a tendency to hit some big shots, even though his clutch numbers suggest that he's trash in the clutch. But I've seen him hit big shots, and I've seen him make big plays down the stretch, whether it's diving on the floor for a loose ball or getting a big steal, taking a big charge. You kind of want Marcus Smart closing. So are you going to go really small and put Tatum at the 5? Yeah, that'll work against a lot of teams, especially if if the Nets plan is to close with KD at the 5, then you can live with closing with Tatum at the 5 and starting all of these offensive threats. But against us and against the Bucks, you're going to get killed doing that. You can't do that against us and the Bucks. One, against the Bucks, obviously, you kind of need size for Giannis, obviously. But also, Brook Lopez is good enough to. You're going to lose the battle if you're forcing the Bucks to put Giannis at the 5. You're going to lose that battle. Is it my opinion? You're going to lose that battle because Giannis can actually play the 5 and is super switchable, super adaptable, a great rim protector. Like, that's a problem. Against us, you're going to get crushed. You're going to get destroyed if you try to put, unless you adopt the Nick Nurse way of playing defense, where guys are flying to the ball and not allowing Joe to get clean looks and all that. You're going to get crushed down there with Joe at the 5, especially with the way Joe has been playing this year, where he has been filling gaps in a way that we haven't seen him do previously, where he's kind of like, oh, okay, I'm going to grab this offensive rebound right now, and I'm going to go do this over here. And I'm going to go do that now because I can't get my shots. Let me grab more rebounds, and let me be more dominant on this side. So I don't know. I think that causes some confusion in terms of what the plan is in terms of who you're going to be starting to close games. They did trade for someone else. They traded Tice to I can't remember who they got. They traded Tice to the Bulls for Cornette and something else, I thought, but whatever. I mean, we'll see. It's a good deal for them because they only had to give up two draft picks. And ultimately, if you're wondering why, how come we didn't trade for Evan Fournier, for example, right? They only gave up 2 draft picks. Well, the specific situation of the Celtics is them having that trade exception means they didn't have to take any players back. You know what I mean? So had we tried to trade for Fournier, we would have had to match his salary plus give up the picks. The Celtics didn't have to do that. So it's just 2 round picks and the Bulls get off that salary, right? So that's like the benefit of the Bulls. The benefit of the Magic. They're trying to rebuild in a really interesting way. And we'll talk about that in a second. The Bulls trade for Vucevic. Listen, offensively, it's a great deal. You know what I mean? I get it. The thing is, I like Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter, whatever. Otto Porter never failed. He just never worked out for the Bulls. He just injured the whole time. He's going to get waived. He'll help somebody, I'm sure, but he could probably help us taking Mike Scott's minutes, honestly. I wouldn't mind bringing Otto Porter off the bench as a minimum, but the Bulls have gotten worse defensively. They also got really white. They've turned into the whitest team in the NBA almost. They were trying to trade for so now what's their starting lineup? I mean, just light skin. You know what I mean? Is now you got Lauri Markkanen, you got Vucevic, you got Zach LaVine. Who knows what their starting 3 is? The starting small forward, maybe it's Patrick Williams, but yeah, I guess they're not that light skin. But Patrick Williams, and they got Kobe White. They were trying to trade for another white guy, and I can't remember who. And it would have just been hilarious if they would have pulled that one off. So I don't know. I just don't know. Like, there's rumors that Thad may start for them. which would make sense defensively. You know, you need some defense out there. You know, Thad and Vucevic, they unite, they come back like old Sixers of old, and can play better defense. Patrick Williams is a nice defender. And you bring Lauri Markkanen off the bench, but then you're going to lose Lauri for nothing this offseason, essentially. If that happens, I can't imagine Lauri wants to come off the bench. So, okay, you start Lauri. That makes you offensively a threat. No question. Offensively, that is a fantastic team. Offensively, fantastic. So many threats on the court at a time. But defensively, you're going to get murdered. You know what I mean? You're going to get fucking crushed defensively. You're going to be trying to outscore every single team that you play against, essentially. I don't know if that's what you want. You know, I just like it's not that I don't like this. It's like what I would have liked is if you could have moved Lauri for something, right? They could have gotten. The thing is that they had traded draft picks to get Vucevic, and essentially they ran out of draft capital because those draft picks that could have been used to get Lonzo. That essentially was the holdup. The Pelicans wanted Lauri and picks for Lonzo. And they couldn't pony up. They didn't have the picks to pony up because they traded them for Vucevic. Lonzo would have helped them. You could have cleared that for, and now you're coming out there. Let's say maybe your team is now Kobe White, Lonzo, Zach at the 3, Thad at the 4, and Vucevic at the 5. That team to me makes a ton more sense. Better defensively, still really good offensively, and now you don't have that. You know what I mean? So I don't necessarily. It's not that I dislike what the Bulls did. I get it. I applaud them going for it. I just am confused at how much Vooch is going to help them. You know, defensively, they're going to struggle a ton. Offensively, sure. The problem is Vucevic is used to playing on a team where there are no elite offensive options. And now he's going to play next to probably the best player he's played with, which is Zach LaVine. You know what I mean? I can't remember his entire he played with Drew for a bit. Maybe Drew was the best player, arguably. He played. No, he's not as good as Zach LaVine is offensively. So what's going to happen when you're playing with someone who's an elite offensive player who needs the ball in his hands, and that's not your thing? We'll see. You know, I just don't know. The Magic, I got to give them credit, man. The Magic rebuilt. You know, the Magic really, man, I got to give them some love here. I'm going to try to make this quick. The Magic essentially said, okay, this Gordon, Fournier, Vucevic triumvirate is just not taking us anywhere. You know what I mean? But credit to them. It took them 4 years to realize it. Is not taking us anywhere. You know, it just isn't good enough. And credit for them for trying, but it just isn't enough. You know, that big three is not a big three. You know what I mean? So they essentially move off of those contracts, move from the past, go into the future. They're essentially going to tank this season. They don't have shit this season now. Maybe get a high draft pick. I don't know if they have next year's draft pick. I think they do. But if they could get a high draft pick, maybe they finish the worst team with the worst record and they get a shot at Cade Cunningham, who people love. I'm not the biggest Cade Cunningham fan. I don't see it, but I am not a great college whatever. I love Jalen Suggs. You know what I mean? Maybe, but whatever. Anyway, it's not the point. This is not about my college. It's not about college. So maybe they get Cade Cunningham, and then you get Markelle Fultz. So they have a lot of guys who have high ceilings. Markelle was playing well for them before he got injured this year. Unfortunately, he was playing great for them. You know what I mean? Markelle comes back. Jonathan Isaac is going to come back next year. Now you got Wendell Carter Jr. So you got 3 really good defenders here. A lot of talent, a lot of upside. That if they can reach their upside and their potential, this is going to be a good team. High draft pick next year. They get more draft capital from the Bulls. You know, it's a good deal. The RJ Hampton, I like RJ Hampton a lot. I think he could probably play well for them. It's a good deal, man. Good for them. Good for the Magic. Listen, it's rare that you're ever going to see people say the Magic did a good job. And maybe, again, I haven't watched any reviews or anyone break down anything that the Magic have done or anything here. This is just my opinion. Maybe other people are going to be like, oh, the Magic trash front office. From my perspective, I love what they did because Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, none of these guys were going to take it to that. Even when people say, oh, man, I can't believe we traded Vucevic. It's like, yo, listen, I get it, man. Vucevic is a nice guy, puts up a lot of numbers. But Andre Drummond puts up a lot of numbers too. It doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? There's only with a center's biggest contribution to winning will always be their defense. You know what I mean? It just is what it is. You need a center that's going to anchor their defense. And then you need something as good as Vucevic is his offense is not like if you just compare him to Joel Embiid, because that was the point. Trading Vucevic was to make space for us to get the chance at someone like Joe. Joe is different. You know, Vucevic is nice. Joe is Vucevic on steroids, crack, speed, all of it, all of the drugs on the super soldier serum. He's been shot up by by Hydra. He was in the Hydra lab right next to Wanda and Pietro. And the only drawback for him is that sometimes his body gets a little injured. But ultimately, he was Vucevic, but then turned into 25% more and then 50% more on defense. You know what I mean? So it just you're limited when you have Vucevic as your best player. You're ultra limited when you're paying a ton of money to Evan Fournier. You're ultra limited when you invest a high draft pick into someone like Aaron Gordon. You're kind of stuck, So moving off of that, it's like the last season of It's like the last episode of Game of Thrones, right? Which people hated. People didn't hate the last episode of Game of Thrones. People hated the last season of Game of Thrones, and they didn't realize it. They think it's that they're blaming the last episode. No, the last episode did its best to fix bad writing that had been done already. You know what I mean? So I don't hate it. I like what the Magic did here. As far as us, listen, I like George Hill. Because George Hill's a nice player. You know what I mean? Daryl Morey, you tweeted out last night. If you're not familiar with George Hill, I'm familiar with George Hill. I think a lot of us are. We're familiar because, the LeBron looking at JR meme in the playoffs is actually preceded by George Hill missing one of two free throws that would have won the game for them. Anyway, I'm familiar with George Hill. 2018, he had the nerve to tweet out 2018 highlights of George Hill against the Celtics. Don't do that, Daryl. Don't do that. Listen, we know you think you're the smartest guy in the room. I'm not fucking dumb. Maybe some other fans are. I'm not dumb. We're not dumb. Relax. Don't try to sell us this shit. George Hill's a nice player. Whose spot is he taking, though? Right? Because that's going to be the question. Well, whose minutes is he going to take? Is he starting? I don't think he's going to start over Seth. I don't think I would like that necessarily. He's a better defender than Seth, but he's not the same shooter. He's a good shooter, but he's not the same shooter that Seth is. We haven't really seen him play this year at all. We have no idea what he has to offer still. And so I would think that he's going to take Furkan's minutes. You know what I mean? Which I'm fine with because Furkan is so damn up and down. I'm okay with it. I just, whatever. The thing is that the rumors yesterday that came out was we traded for George Hill. The immediate rumor after that, the Sixers are now out on Kyle Lowry. If trading for George Hill is the reason why we said, okay, cool, we don't need Kyle Lowry, then I got a problem with the front office. Then we need to talk. We need to have a talk. Okay? Now, if it was more like, hey, we're not willing to give up what they want for Kyle Lowry. Let's get somebody who can still help us, another backcourt guy who can help us, a vet. Okay, that's fair. But if it's that, we got George Hill now, we good. Well, that's problematic, Daryl. That's why. Don't you dare tweet me the 2018 highlights. My only thing with George Hill, again, is George Hill has essentially been overrated since the day that the Spurs managed to trade him to the Pacers for the pick that allowed them to select Kawhi. Since that day, George Hill has been overrated. You know what I mean? Essentially, people love George Hill, and there's a ton of stats that support that he contributes to winning. But he never passes the eye test. That's the truth. He never passes the eye test. When you watch him, you're like, I don't really see what special is. He's a backup. You know what I mean? He's a backup point guard. If he's coming here to start, I can't imagine that happening. I can't imagine he's coming here to start. You know what I mean? If he does come here to start, not that it would hurt, it's going to make us a better defensive team. George Hill has a problem staying healthy also. George Hill ages 5 years every year. I mean, you see him 1 year, he looks young. The next year, he has grays all over his face. I'm just so confused by how he ages. He needs to get with the same exfoliator that Tyrese gets with and exfoliate that skin a bit. I just don't know. I just don't know. That's my only thing about George Hill. I just don't know. And the problem is, to me, Tony Bradley was showing things this year, I thought, because again, right, there's a difference between being on a bad team and putting up numbers and being on a good team with expectations, stepping in and playing really, really well over the last week. In the beginning of the season, he looked like nothing. By the time we just traded him, he looks like something. You know what I mean? He fucking looks like something. And you ended up trading him for George Hill. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, okay, you're chasing a championship. I don't know how much George Hill actually makes you better to chase a championship, better suited to chase a championship. I do know that I feel like Tony Bradley could have, if he continued to improve, that we could have moved on from Dwight next year and just had Tony Bradley, or Tony could have continued to improve while we don't have Joe here and continue raising his stock and maybe could have traded him for something more next year. You know what I mean? That's kind of my only issue there. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I thought Tony was showing really good things, and now we got George Hill for him, and So I don't know. I don't know. I get it because Tony can't really play this year. Not with Dwight. Not when Joe comes back. Joe's going to be reevaluated, I think, today. I actually think he's supposed to be reevaluated today. So he might be back next week. We don't know. I assume that the reason why we traded Tony Bradley is because we assume that Joe's going to be back when we come back home next week. So we won't be without a second center. We'll be only out with the second center for the next 3 games, essentially. You know what I mean? So I think that is the point. The Cavaliers are short of center too. The Cavaliers, that's going to be one of the games we play. They just traded JaVale McGee to the Nuggets, which is a good trade for the Nuggets, for Isaiah Hartenstein, who's okay, but I guess you feel like you probably, you don't really care. Maybe you chalk up the game against the Nuggets, no big deal. But so I don't know. I assume that that's just what that means. I just don't see, what is George Hill coming here to do? That's the question. I'm sorry, shaking my table. That's the question. What is his goal here? What's the upside? Whose minutes is he taking? We saw when Seth came back, because I think a lot of people were like, well, he's going to take Maxi's minutes. And it's like, well, no, because Seth was injured. That's why Maxi was getting a lot of minutes. Now that Seth is back yesterday, you saw Maxi played 5-10 seconds. He didn't play at all, really. He played like 10 seconds or something. So, okay, injury insurance, but when it's not injury insurance, whose minutes is he taking? I'm assuming he's going to take Furkan's minutes. He's a better defender than Furkan. He's probably a more consistent shooter than Furkan, a better playmaker than Furkan. Furkan makes a ton of mistakes generally, but he doesn't have the upside I think that Furkan has. Furkan at times can go off, 13 points in a quarter. And that's not really George Hill's thing, but he's a better defender. So I'm guessing he's going to take Furkan's minutes. It's the only thing I can assume. But that's it. I guess we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to see. You know what I mean? I think I'm going to do a podcast. I just watched the latest episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Great, fantastic episode. I may even do a podcast on that episode because it's bigger. I think a little bit bigger than Marvel. I think it's one of my favorite episodes of any show that Marvel's ever done. So, so that's that. Obviously we'll be back right next week to typical Sixers once these assholes come back from the West Coast. Yeah, that's it. Everyone, stay safe. The drill. Wash your hands. Wear a mask. I hate your face. Your breath smells. Black Lives Matter. Asian Lives Matter. Arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor. And that's it. Take care.
Yo. Yo. Justice for the blind. Just something that'll find in the rhymes that are coming from my mind. Used to come